Chapter 26. I've met Rabini a few times, of course, not now, but in my previous life. At that time, she was a beautiful woman with outstanding beauty who was thoroughly managed, but the Empress, who is still 10 years younger than that, was truly a beautiful person with eyes widely open. But at the same time, there was a corner as cold as it looks. Galyahan Lombardi, right? Rabini slowly reached out, one hand, to my father. If the women's imperial greetings were the ones I practiced with Shananet last time, the men's greetings were two different ways. One, bow with hand near the heart in the same way and toe bow down the hand of the royal family and place it on the forehead. Of course, the second method was a little more polite, a greeting method that is rarely used anymore in greetings. The Empress didn't take the hand outright, and my father looked at it for a moment and put it on his forehead. I also followed my father to say hello, but the Empress was not looking at me. She seemed to be feeling a strange sense of victory as she looked at my father with slightly closed eyes. I saw the guest wagon I invited to dinner, so I saw it. What happened? The Empress asked, looking back at the two knights. Well, that, of course, the word was confused. The Empress ordered to forcibly check our courage, and the scene of apologizing for him was done by the Empress again. Rabini's eyes, looking at them, were particularly cold. Don't do this here. Let's go inside. It's not polite to keep guests on the street. The Empress, who said so, turned around and started walking. 5 or 6 maids followed her. My father looked at it with a hard face for a while. Then he felt my gaze and looked back. Shall we go too, Tia? There must be a lot of thoughts like this that. My father laughed as he reached out to me. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The place where the Empress guided us was a dining hall built specifically for dinner at the Empress Palace. Rabini called about 10 guests every month to manage his network, but often the Emperor was also with her. So the Empress dinner among the nobles was an important event that they wanted to attend. But as my father and I stepped inside, we realized that today's dinner was different from what we had heard of. There was only tableware set for 5 people on the long table. Today, I invited only Lombardi. We have something to celebrate, right? The Empress laughed, with her large eyes gently folded. It was very beautiful, but I didn't feel any beauty in it. Rather, I felt uncomfortable as only the shabby appearance of the second prince was reminded of me. It is an honor. My father still greeted politely and sat down on the chair pointed to by the Empress. And as soon as we settled down, the door of the dining hall reopened, as if waiting, and first prince entered. Mother, welcome to Astana. Astana's friend is here today. Astana glanced at me and replied with a gentle appearance in the world. That guy and I are friends. I wanted to laugh but held it in my seat. Hello, Lombardi young lady. How are you? Your Majesty the First Prince. The first prince who received my father's greeting sat down on the side of the Empress by bruising it as it was. By the way, it was the seat in front of me. Oh, I feel uncomfortable. I'm going to tell you something I couldn't say a while ago, but Empress. My father, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke. The Empress stopped drinking water with a smile. Please speak. Today, on the way to the Imperial Palace, my courage was checked by the Imperial Knights. Oh, although the Empress looked surprised, it was actually close to a smiling face. Usually, if you let go of pretense like that, there's nothing to say. I don't know, but I have nothing to say. However, my father did not give in and continued the conversation with a firm face. In the Imperial Palace, Lombardi's blood relatives are not subject to checks or search. Wouldn't that be the law? Father's protest was justified. It is. It's weird. However, the Empress laughed at my father's words. Why are there so many exceptions only to Lombardi? All other families entering the Imperial Palace are subject to thorough checks. The Empress' speech was very twisted, but somehow it didn't seem to be intended. Rather, the negative feelings toward Lombardi were so strong that it was close to a cynical speech flow without even knowing. The Empress soon laughed and added to see if he realized such a mistake. Of course, that's because Lombardi is a special family in many ways. Father didn't answer anything. I only faced the Empress for a while without looking away. It was when the door of the dining hall was opened once again that the atmosphere that seemed to be shattered at any time was distracted. Haha, Galyahan! It was Emperor Javanes who came in, calling out my father's name with a loud voice from the beginning. As the second prince, he was a man with black hair and an open-minded atmosphere. I followed my father and got up from the seat and greeted me according to imperial courtesy. It's been a long time since this. How are you? I am glad that your majesty is in good health. It's always me. My father and the emperor are actually the same age and seemed to have had quite a close relationship when they were younger. The emperor's gaze, who patted my father's shoulder with his thick hand, reached me. Oh, you are Florentia. Florentia Lombardi greets His Majesty the Emperor. I am a surprisingly strong type in the real world, and fortunately, I did not make a mistake this time. The emperor's laughter and dry eyes glanced over me. Yes, yes, you are a very pretty child. Thank you, Your Majesty. I think you have a very smart daughter who resembles you, Galyahan. The emperor seemed good at praising someone. Let's sit down. As the emperor took over at the top, the dinner began as the attendants brought and carried food. While everyone was busy preparing meals, I felt something a little weird. Still, he is a son, but the emperor came to the dinner table and never gave a glance to the first prince. Astana seemed to be familiar with such a father and didn't seem to care. So, what were you talking about before I came? I was just saying hello without saying anything. The Empress looks around on a smiling day. Father stared at the Empress. I don't think that's it, Kalyahan. The Emperor took turns looking at my father and the Empress and said, if there's anything in your heart, it's okay to say it without surprise. However, the Emperor's words were not sincere but empty words. He didn't wonder what my father wanted to say at all, and the Empress didn't think my father would say anything special in front of the Emperor. The form of sipping the fruit wine that the attendant gave me was relaxed. I was angry. In front of my grandfather, these two people were very careful with the word, seen making fun of my father. But at the same time, the Empress was reasonable, so I thought my father wouldn't say anything. But I was telling the Empress about what happened on the way to dinner today. It was amazing. Father did not back down, even before the Emperor. The Emperor and the Empress also paused for a moment, as if they were smiling, as if unexpectedly that my father would come out like this. What happened? The Emperor asked, scratching his beard. Our wagon was checked by the Imperial Knights. The Emperor was also quite surprised. Then I glanced and see the Empress. Something like that happened. I noticed roughly what had already happened. We probably weren't the ones who overpowered in that way. I have a strong feeling that I may not have experienced the same thing as V's. The Empress was not showing her expression with her lowered eyes. There seems to be a misunderstanding or something. The Emperor, who had been steamed for a while, said, they stopped the carriage with the Lombardy emblem. It doesn't seem like a misunderstanding, Your Majesty. Galyahan, you seem very angry. Obviously, he wasn't like my father. Because of his timid personality, he was very different from usual, who couldn't speak badly to an employee who wasn't the Emperor. My daughter was very surprised. My father replied in a low voice. Only then could I understand my father's actions. My father is now angry at the fact that he was scared by the articles, not that he was insulted. It seemed like a cold wind was blowing over the table for a moment. Haha, I'm sorry for this. He burst into laughter, but the Emperor eventually had to apologize for being sorry. However, there was no mention of the Empress in any of the words that followed. Understand the knight's spirit of striking. Some cannot accept the special relationship between the imperial family and Lombardy in their loyalty. In the end, it was the knight that took the wrong. The Empress, who instructed everything, is left out and regarded as an individual's fault. My father knew it too, and he nodded with a small sigh. I just hope this will never happen again. Well then, it won't happen again. Now, get a drink. The Emperor shook his chest as if he was promising and poured alcohol to my father. I looked at the Emperor's face, pretending to drink the juice in front of me, and it was creepy. It was a beautiful face that was still smiling, but his sharp eyes were staring at my father without buzzing. She has been trying to kill the second prince that day, but she is a very scary person. So the full-fledged dinner began, and prepared foods began to be served after another. Of course, it was a great dish because it was served by the Empress, but I couldn't do that to Lombardy. It was when I was making a sober evaluation. The Emperor, having a mischievous conversation with my father, suddenly asked a question about his business. Yes, you said the business you led was a big success. The Empress, who had not said anything after my father protested to the Emperor, also showed interest this time. It was great to see Angenas and Lombardy, the two main pillars of the empire, working together. It's an exaggeration. Since when did Angenas become the main pillar of this empire? He was an emperor who slowly raised his wife, Angenas, to the same level as Lombardy. Now, Emperor Jovanes was trying to stop Lombardy's solo with Angenas. It is also the reason why the emperor vaguely knows what she is doing to the second prince, but pretends not to know. However, about 3 years later, the partnership between the Empress and the Emperor ends as Angenas fought the Emperor's wrath through absurd tax evasion. Please help the top Durak a lot in the future. Gallehan, Lombardy. They're just starting, so they're awkward. The Empress said to my father with a world-friendly smile. But the answer that came back wasn't very friendly. I've already spoken to the top lord of Durak, but I'm going to leave the textile business soon. Empress. Yeah? Perhaps it was the first time I heard it. The Empress' poker face was finally broken. She seemed to think that if my father, who is the center of the business, is omitted, there will be a setback in the business. It is the money line that will make the first prince become crown prince, but it will be a big deal if it dries. I'm thinking of doing another personal business. That's really fast. Isn't it overly rushing? I hope you can help the top of Durak a little more. I'm sorry, but I don't think I can. The embarrassed Empress tried to persuade him somehow, but my father didn't budge. It's not always possible for the top of Lombardy to help the top of Durak. In a word, he was saying that you guys should do it on your own. The Empress' mouth, who properly grasped the meaning, trembled, and the Empress' eyes changed. Until a while ago, she had been thinking about how to force this seemingly relaxed person to do what she wanted, but now that thought seemed completely closed. Galyahan, you are very different from what I thought. I don't know what kind of expectations Empress had of me, but I apologize for not being able to live up to it. Originally, my father is not the one who speaks so firmly. It seemed that the Empress was not firmly happy with it. That's the same for me. So how is the work of the second prince and the treatment of Lombardy? In many ways, he was a terrible person. After dinner, you don't know whether food goes into your mouth or nose. On the way home in the carriage, my father spoke little. As usual, the time to fall asleep was past, so I cut my father's legs and stroked my head and fell asleep because I have no strength. My father muttered as he looked out the window. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Inside the dark room with a single candle lit, it was a small separate palace, but it was too big and empty for an 11-year-old boy left alone. Perez, sitting as if hiding in the corner of the bed, took out a pocket in his hand, and he drank the golden medicine in it with one gulp, following exactly what Florentia said. It was bitter medicine, but Perez didn't show off. It was because there is no one to look at even if he felt bitter. Perez, who closed the lid of the vial, took out a round candy from his pocket and ate it. The white ball becomes convex to follow the shape of the candy. Humumu. Perez muttered like a snort. The bitter taste is now familiar enough to get used to, but not this sweetness. It was unfamiliar and awkward. But Perez diligently rolled the candy in her mouth. It was because he felt better little by little. Does the sweet taste spreading out make your heart beat? If not, Perez touched his soft handbag. He remembered the face of Florentia he met during the day. For a while, she had a cute face that seemed to be a fairy in the forest. In particular, her big, round green eyes, which seemed to have taken the color of a blade of grass, were stuck in his head. And the boy said, I wish you could live. No, I think you have to live. Perez held the bottle in one hand as if he would never let it be taken away. Crap. The candy rolled in his mouth once more. Sweet. Perez muttered as he watched the shadows of the candles. End of chapter 26. Chapter 27. The endless afternoon. I ate snacks that were spread out on the table with the twins. When I heard a snoring sound from both sides, it seemed that Gilio and Myron had fallen asleep earlier. With my face on a hard table, I looked up at the sky. It was a clear sky without a single cloud. How can I overcome the danger? How fortunately I safely delivered the medicine to the second prince. In fact, when I couldn't find the palace where Paris lived, I had somehow prepared a countermeasure to give him an antidote. Cards that have not been used this time seem to be more useful next time. Wow, it's frowning. I stretched out once and yawned to break my mouth. Do you think I'm stupid when you see this? Obviously, there are plans to carry out in the future, and my body is refusing to do anything. Even my father couldn't see my face any more than before. He was so busy these days. Sometimes I could have breakfast together, but even then, I couldn't easily talk. It was because I always thinking about something. Thanks to my busy father, I am still nursed by twins today. Wow, when Gilio fell asleep, the blanket that covering him fell to the floor. I thought I would take it for a moment. It's annoying. I turned my head out the window, pretending not to see it, and already half asleep, rolling my head blankly, trying to figure out what to do next. Well, I mean, now we have to solve Isturia's problem. As far as she can afford, Istira himself can save money and go to the Imperial Academy. But it was my side that was urgent. It was my job to help myself to send her to the academy as early as I can and help her focus on her research. Let's stay still. When is the deadline for applying for the academy this year? I opened my ear with one little finger and muttered. The rainy season ended last month and it's spring. The moment my thoughts got there, my mind flashed as if I was hit by a big hammer in my head. This month is the end. Fortunately, it is still the beginning of the month, but it was not the time to be doing this. I got up from my seat and headed to the door. Wow, Tia, where are you going? Myron asked me while rubbing his sleepy eyes. Restroom. Okay, come quickly. If I said otherwise, he would have tried to follow me. Fortunately, Myron couldn't overcome the drowsiness and closed her eyes again. I shut the door silently as I watched him fall asleep again. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Durac owner sat on the other side and glanced at Galyahan looking at the documents. Aside from being the son of Lulac Lombardi, he was a very handsome man. Especially it was like that in appearance. These days, women say that they like delicate and pretty men rather than sloppy men. But Galyahan did exactly that. He was tall and skinny, so he had a good looking in his clothes, and above all, his gentle smile that he occasionally made was worth a favor to everyone. For example, among female employees at the top of Durac, Galyahan's popularity was skyrocketing. However, that was not the reason Durac's owner is seeing Galyahan's attention right now. Durac's top lord, who was coughing loudly, dulled his dry mouth for no reason. You'll find out thoroughly what new project Galyahan Lombardi is planning. It was a new order from the Empress. The Empress Palace, which he visited for greetings, was really an atmosphere where a cold breeze was blowing. He doesn't know why, but he only guessed it might be related to Galyahan. So why did you go outside the eyes of the Empress' attention? He is familiar with the fear of the Empress, kicked his tongue inward toward Galyahan. Rabini Angenes was a persistent woman who couldn't choose any means or methods to get what she wanted. He felt a bit of remorse, but he opened his mouth justifying that he couldn't help it for his own survival. Galyahan, you. Yes? Galyahan, who had been eagerly looking at the sales status of the Koroy cotton textiles this week, raised his head at the call of the owner. The personal business that you're thinking about, are you not going to tell me? The owner said with a nice smile and deliberately more friendly. I'm still thinking about what to do with the plan. I'm just thinking about how to implement it. At Galyahan's words that he was in trouble, the face of the top lord was even wider. He has found a chance to dig in. Since then, I have a much richer experience in life than you do. So let me know. Do you know if I know a good way? The words made it plausible, but in fact, it wasn't like words. What kind of businessman is going to share his ideas with others? Although he was a person of Angenes and was incompetent, Galyahan, who thought that he was a good person who gave up Durak, blinked in confusion. No matter how much he's doing the top job for the first time, he can't be aware of that much morality. But what is the reason for the sudden confiscation of the face? Galyahan coughed, without deliberately hiding what was inconvenient. He didn't even have to think long. The Empress' eyes were still vivid as she looked coldly at himself at the dinner table. I don't know if you were trying to find the information you could find from the Durak company, or if you tried to put a spoon on it, like the Koroy cotton textile business. Galyahan said, shrugging her shoulders. Well, I don't think it's time to talk to anyone yet. Well, but it was Galyahan who also felt a little funny. It was obvious that the Empress had something to do, but sadly the Durak owner wasn't a good person at thinking about people's intentions. Even now, when Galyahan refused, he was almost crying. It was proof that there were no good talents besides the Empress. Galyahan added a word with that smile, who thought he was kind. But one thing is certain, if it succeeds, it will be a business that will overturn everything in the empire. Perhaps the Empress who heard this news will be sweeter. Galyahan laughed more kindly, as it seemed to repay a little for making Tia scared that day. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. From the residence of Shananet and the twins, I headed straight to Clarivan. Fortunately, Clarivan, sitting in his office, opened the door to me while being a little puzzled. What are you doing here? I have one question. To see my face, Clarivan raised his eyebrows as he moved the papers that were forming the tower on the desk aside. It seemed that he was curious. How do I go to the Imperial Academy, sir? Academy? Is this the Imperial Academy? Clarivan looked confused. He asked while taking off the rimless glasses that Clarivan was wearing for a while. Do you want to go to the academy? Then he even frowned. Imperial Academy is a 6-year system, and once you enter it, you can't come out except for a once-a-year vacation. I closed. No, not me. The threat, pretending to be advised, spoke quickly before continuing. Before other than me, someone wanted to go to the Imperial Academy. Aha. Suddenly, Clarivan's sharp momentum softens. Clarivan, who leaned against the back of the chair in a more comfortable look, asked, with only curiosity left, My lady asks me how to get into the academy instead. Who is it? I wanted to talk about my personal life, but I replied because I couldn't hide the situation where I was asking Clarivan about things. It's Estira, who wants to go to the academy and study medicine properly. We're talking about Dr. Estira, O'Malley's youngest disciple. Clarivan, who seemed to be knocking on a calculator in his head, nodded. If she is, she will probably be able to enter. Probably, if I tell the Lord, the enrollment fee and tuition will be easily solved. The only thing left is the entrance exam, but I'm afraid to see a very basic literacy. Estira is not a student, but a researcher. She has to go in. At my resolute words, Clarivan tilted his head. Oops, I spoke too hard without knowing. I groaned quickly. So Estira said she wanted to do that. Clarivan, who looked at me with suspicious eyes for a moment, said, if she wants to be a researcher rather than a new student, the story is a little different. The requirements are much more demanding. Well, it couldn't be easy because it's the Imperial Academy. Besides, Estira is not an academy graduate. I swallowed gulp and sharpened my ears. Once a research student needs a lot more money than a student, it's because he or she has to pay most of the money that goes into doing personal research. And what? And she needs a letter of recommendation. A letter of recommendation? He said it was money somehow, but the letter of recommendation was not something I could write. Whose recommendation do I need? I do not know. First of all, the recommendation from Dr. O'Malley, who has been teaching Estira, is the easiest to get. I nodded, recalling the face of Dr. O'Malley, who didn't seem to be so picky. Dr. O'Malley is the most well-known as Lombardy's primary physician. So if Estira receives a recommendation and submits an application for admission as a Lombardy scholar, Academy will give permission immediately. After all, Lombardy is the best. There was no place where the influence could not reach. Clarivan continued to explain to me, thinking that he should protect his family no matter what. In fact, the best thing is the recommendation of my lord, or Brockle, who once served as the vice president of the academy, but it will be difficult because they are both very careful about writing recommendations. This is Dr. O'Malley, who has taught Estira directly. He knows best how smart and passionate she is for herbal medicine, so getting a letter of recommendation won't be difficult. I thought so. Thank you for letting me know. I will then go to deliver this news to Estira, sir. I nodded to my belly button and left Clarivan's office. You need to hurry. When I arrived at Dr. O'Malley's laboratory, I immediately understood the meaning of Clarivan's smile, who had laughed ominously for some reason. Thank you, sir. Please go and work hard. What is this? Standing at the door, I hardened. A greasy man, as if oiled from head to toe, was greeting Dr. O'Malley with a fierce smile. Hair oil, maybe. Yes, I will go ahead and study hard so as not to harm my teacher's reputation. In the back of the friendly looks, Estira was looking at the two people smile a bitter smile. In my ears, who was still grasping the situation, the voice of a man shouting came into my ears. Thank you so much for writing the letter of recommendation. End of chapter 27. Chapter 28. No, the doorknob in my hand rattled. Miss Florentia, Dr. O'Malley asked me, wondering when he saw me standing still holding the doorknob. Are there any uncomfortable places? Not uncomfortable then. Right now, I feel like flying by karate techniques. Hearing that the recommendation you should give Istira is given to someone else. I wanted to grab Dr. Umali's fat and squeeze it, but I asked innocently, raising my mouth hard. What good is there? At my question, a gleaming man who was excited by Dr. O'Malley quickly approached and said hello. Hello, my lady. I'm Jason. This time, I was invited by Dr. O'Malley to go to the Imperial Academy. There was no place to be flawed except for the burden of being polite to greet, but it was a feeling of unfavorableness. First of all, I don't like it just by intercepting the letter of recommendation that Istira should receive. Well, are you a student of doctor? It's the first time I saw you. I've been in and out of the lab a few times so far, and it's the first time I've seen it. Jay's son is a student I taught for a while, a few years ago. A few years ago, not even now. I wrote a letter of recommendation because he wanted to go to the Imperial Academy this time. Heh. Thank you very much, Dr. O'Malley's letter of recommendation. I'm sure I'll get a lot of attention from the Academy Research Lab. Jay's son couldn't hide his laughter. He was happy just by imagining it. In comparison, Estira's face was dark. Although she was forced to laugh, I could see that it was quite gloomy. Steer then. Now, Jason glanced at me and took lock with Dr. O'Malley. Miss Florentia, aren't you feeling uncomfortable? Apparently, Dr. O'Malley and Jason seemed to have separate places to go. Perhaps it was in return for writing a letter of recommendation. I nodded with a shaky face. I'm here to see Estira. Don't worry and go. Yes, then see you again next time. Dr. O'Malley leaves the lab with Jason, who is still grinning. In the quiet space, Estira was working hard again. Remove the teacups left on the table and arrange the refreshment bowls. I approached Estira carefully and said, Estira, are you okay? Estira laughed faintly at my question. Yes, my lady, it's okay. I am. I'm rather sorry to you. Are you sorry for me? I didn't understand what Estira said. I'm sorry. I have something to do. Even though the letter was taken away by a man named Jason, if you talk to Dr. O'Malley, he will definitely write a recommendation to Estira. However, Estira's bitter smile only got deeper. Something was weird. It's not going to be this depressing. Estira, recommendation letter. Estira, who had been shutting her mouth for a while, difficultly opened her mouth. Only one recommendation letter for the academy is valid per year, my lady. Huh? One piece? Yeah. Only then did Estira laugh as if consoling, toward me, who understood the situation and was stupid. Next year, you will write it to me. As I looked at it, laughing but not laughing, I felt the responsibility. It was because of my work. I told her I would send her to the Imperial Academy and didn't pay attention to it. Dr. O'Malley's letter of recommendation was missed because the application deadline was approaching. I said, looking at Estira's drooping shoulders, Don't worry too much, Estira. I'll send you to the academy at whatever cost. If I didn't receive Dr. O'Malley's recommendation, I couldn't stop by getting someone else's recommendation. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Well, it was breakfast with my father after a long time. I was chewing the fruit and plant it for future work, and I turned my head to the side of my father, who had already burst out for the third time. There was a deep wrinkle in my father's beauty, who always smiled like sunshine when he was with me. Dad, why is that? When I asked as I pulled my sleeves, my father looked at me with full consciousness. It's nothing. I was thinking a little bit. I think it was a worry rather than an idea. If you have a hard time, it's good to talk to someone else. At my words, my father stroked my head as if he was amazed. I've been worrying even for Tia. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal, so let's get rid of the ground. I kept shooting my shit at my father. Shooting my shirt at my father. My father sighed and smiled as he looked at his little daughter, who knew nothing, wanting to tell him anything. I'm just trying to do another job like last time in the textile business. Because I have no experience, I'm hesitant. Business? Come to think of it, my father said that at the Empress dinner. Sooner or later, I'm thinking of getting my hands off the Koroi cotton fabric and doing some other personal business. Honestly, at that time, I thought my father was in front of the Empress and put a fire in front of her. It seemed to be sincere. Besides, I'm so deeply worried about it. I wanted to help if there was anything I could do to help. Dad, it's great, but what is it? Can't you explain it to me, too? I sat a little closer to my father and said, I'm very, very curious. My father, who is also weak to me, pondered for a moment and then began to explain his business idea in simple words that a child could understand. To be honest, the explanation was long and complicated. My father himself wasn't exactly confused, but it was long and confused in the middle. However, as I listened to my father's explanation, I shouted, Jackpot! He felt his face glowing red with joy and excitement. My father's business plan was a new concept that wasn't there yet. However, it was very familiar to me. If this business is in place, my dad will have tremendous success on this alone. No, I could have been convinced that the commerce itself of the empire would develop into a completely different from before. Dad, it's the best, I shouted, hugging my father's waist tightly, as if I didn't think he would have understood everything I just explained. My father smiled and hugged my face to face. Dad is strengthened. Tia likes it this way. However, it was my father who did not understand all of the repercussions this business would bring, because this was great. And the person who could make a fantastic combination with my father flashed in my head. Daddy, Daddy, why is that so, Tia? If you have any questions, ask Mr. Clarivan. Clarivan? Yeah, my father, too, knows that he has worked quite closely with Clarivan while doing the Koroy cotton business. How crisp Clarivan is at the top. He is the same age as my father. He has strangely much knowledge of the upper part compared to the relatively young age. But for some reason, my father seemed unwilling. Clarivan, to my father's ambiguous reaction, I cried out because he was so sweet. If I ask for something I don't know, Mr. Clarivan will always kindly teach me. The first impression may be a little cold, but it doesn't hurt. Yeah, I just think about it. My father was compelled to answer my torch, but he seemed reluctant. I think someone is afraid of Clarivan. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I read my dad's work and I was walking inside the mansion to go to my business. Grandpa's schedule does not change unless there is anything special. The schedule, repeated weekly for decades, remained the same until I helped my grandfather's work. So this morning, the second day of the week, is a day when he goes to work alone without meetings. It meant that it was a relatively leisurely schedule. I was heading to the office with a relatively light heart until I heard very annoying laughter down the stairs. Haha, Estira, you want to go to the academy? I stopped and looked down the stairs. It was a guy named Estira and Jason who seemed a little angry. Estira, do you have any idea what Imperial Academy is like? Of course, I know it's a hard place to go, senior, but I'm sure someday, it's late this year, but someday. Wait, you don't think you can't go because I got a recommendation from Dr. O'Malley? A guy named Jason who behaved so politely in front of me, and his attitude towards Estira was completely different. Yes, I thought it was all pretending. I sat down on the stairs and listened more to the conversation between the two. Do you know what my family is doing? Jason asked Estira. However, before Estira responds, she shrugs and answers, it's a company that specializes in medicine. Oh, I said that the greasy face looks familiar somewhere. The image that first urged Astalio and brought it into the gambling game was the second of the plan's superiors. Astalio, who is much younger, tried to follow him as an older brother. Later, because Astalio owed gambling debt, Lombardi's property was handed over to the top of plan. My patience was reversed because I tried to take the real estate that had been sold at a low price in exchange of Astalio's debt. When I think about that time, my anger rises again. In the Imperial Academy, the impacts that I build up will serve as wings for me in the future. But do you dare go beyond my recommendation? Jason laughed at Estira with his head bowed up and down as if it wasn't worth it. Know your place, Estira. At that moment, the words filled with ridicule seemed to get stuck in my heart. You don't know your place until the end. What on earth is that place? I couldn't say anything to Jason, and it was as if my past was reflecting in Estira standing still. The days when I was always ignored by them, they told me, always know your place, feeling that they have a higher position than anyone in the family, popped into my mind like it just happened yesterday, and it made me angry. What the hell did Estira do wrong? She just said, I want to go to the academy. Should she listen to such humiliation like that? I got up from the stairs where I was sitting. Then I stepped forward to the office. Originally, I was planning to ask my grandfather to get a letter of recommendation for Estira, and I didn't even worry too much because I could cover their insufficient research funds from my pocket money. However, the plan has changed. Jason Flang's recommendation from Dr. O'Malley, you're going to get a lot of attention at the academy. Just when I thought that a man who seemed to have spilled all the oil in his head would use the name Lombardi in front of people and shudder. It seems like it will flip over again. I have to change the strategy. I clenched my fists and turned to the office again. End of chapter 28. Chapter 29. Lombardi's office in the mansion. Heavy air that seemed to be unable to breathe was filling the interior of the office like a crush. It was a feeling of desolation that the culprit would want to turn back and run out again as soon as he stepped into this place. It was Lulak Lombardi sitting at the desk in the mansion offices, creating such a terrifying atmosphere. Lulak, who was nicknamed the Lion of Lombardi when he was younger, grew deeper and heavier as he got older. Now he was angry like a thunderbolt, but when he was deeply troubled like today, the overbearing appearance reappeared. Lulak was looking at the statue of Natalia, his wife, on the window. It was a bust given by her granddaughter, Florentia, as a present. He always enjoyed it with longing and affection for his wife, but it was a little different nowadays. Natalia. Lulak gave the deceased wife a low name. We should have been a bit more strict parents. This was the first son of both couples. On top of that, there was Jeannette, the eldest daughter, but since childhood, she was a child who couldn't reach his hands. For this reason, Viz, who has a childlike accident, and the naughty side, took the couple's affection, especially Natalia's attention. And that was the problem. It was too late when he realized that something was wrong with V's growing figure. The Lambrou Empire was mostly a society of thorough firstborn succession. The V's recognized it at a very early age. However, from generation to generation, Lombardi was a family that gave priority to the individual's ability over the firstborn and succeeded to the main office. As Lulak got older and his children grew older, his worries deepened. If he had the right children, he wanted him to take over the Lord's job and take a break from tomorrow, but there was no right person. Not long ago, he showed this feeling to her oldest daughter, Jeannette, but her daughter's answer was cold. I've seen how many things my father carries on his back. The longest I've seen among the brothers. And I don't intend to live that kind of life, father. Lulak was forced to laugh bitterly and nod his head. No matter how much is given, if you don't want it, it becomes a terrible chair with thorns. Not too long ago, Viz made another big mistake. Viz, who is in charge of managing Lombardy, owned real estate in the central region of the empire, sold the land to a nobleman close to him at an excessively low price. The problem was that the land had been told that iron ore had been buried steadily, knowing that Viz sold the land for his external influence. Fortunately, from the beginning, it was considered a small mine, so the financial damage was not so great. However, it was only this time that Lulak knew for sure that Viz can forsake Lombardy's interests for his own personal gain. When the thoughts reached that point, it was time to finally see a big sigh out of Lulak's mouth. Thut. The sound of a small knock tickled his ears. Who are you? Lulak asked at an unfamiliar knock. Grandfather, this is Tia. Tia? A cheerful, loud voice replied outside the door. Surprised, Lulak got up from his seat and opened the door directly. Grandpa! Florentia, whose face looked like a flower on both cheeks, smiled wide as she looked at Lulak. Hey, our Tia is here. And at the same time, the heavy air that was squeezing the office and Lulak flew away in no time. He hugged the little granddaughter who ran in and hugged his leg, laughing at Lulak. Ka! A smile on Lulak's face continued at the sound of Florentia's laughter. It was hard to think he is the same person who had been serious a while ago. Are you busy with your jobs, grandfather? Florentia asked. I am not very busy. Why is it happening? To Lulak's question, Florentia energetically replied, Please write a letter of recommendation, Grandpa. Letter of recommendation? Yeah. Lulak tilted his head for a moment, then put Florentia down on the sofa. When Galliahan and her granddaughter visited the office together, Florentia always had a place to sit. After a while, cookies and juice were placed on the table. Looking at it for a moment, Florentia quickly bites into a large cookie. It was too casual for coming to receive a letter of recommendation from Lord. It's an 8-year-old child to know what. Lulak bruised at himself and smiled at his granddaughter. Is it delicious? Yes, it's sweet. Lulak stroked Florentia's head in an unspoiled appearance. Yes, write a letter of recommendation. Probably it seemed that she didn't know well, but it wasn't a simple thing to come and ask for a letter of recommendation from the Lord. Receiving a letter of recommendation stamped with the seal of the Lord, in a word, meant receiving full support from Lombardy. It also said that if anything happened to him, Lombardy would intervene. It couldn't be yours. Who was it for? It's Estira. She is a student of Dr. O'Malley, and she says she wants to go to the Imperial Academy to do research, herbology. Then she should get a recommendation from Dr. O'Malley. Dr. O'Malley has already given a recommendation letter to another person. Probably Florentia was looking for the grandfather who would do this purely because he wanted to help the child. Lulak seemed to be warming up once again. However, the letter of recommendation from the Lord is still. What was left now was how to burn well without hurting the granddaughter's heart. But Florentia, this grandfather's letter of recommendation is not so easy to give out. Florentia sat still listening with her big eyes open. Lulak was already sweating in his head, thinking about what to do if his granddaughter started crying. The tail of his smiling mouth was able to tremble a couple of times. An unusually weak personality to blood and flesh was also manifested here. Yeah, Brockle's recommendation would be better than this grandfather's recommendation. Brockle was a scholar who served as the vice president of the academy, and after retirement, he was a scholar who entered the Lombardy family who had been providing support. So it wasn't as much as a recommendation from Lord, but it would be a great help if you send that child named Estira to Brockle and get an appropriate evaluation. I need both. Lulak stopped talking. Speaking of two sheets, grandfather's recommendation and Brockle's recommendation, two of them. Lulak was embarrassed and was looking for something to say for a moment. Florentia asked Lulak like that. You said you need a reasonable evaluation, didn't you? Yes, I did. What if I want to get both of your letters of recommendation? Florentia seemed to be sincere, because Estira is really smart and makes everything well. She makes it well? Lulak asked, seemingly curious. Yeah. Knowing well about medicine and applying that knowledge to developing and creating were different stories. Many scholars knew how to do the former, but the latter was rare. Then I'll bring the medicine made by Estira. Florentia asked, putting down the cookie he was holding in his hand. It would be difficult to make me and Brockle satisfy at the same time. Estira can do it. You seem to have a lot of confidence. Lulak laughed at her young granddaughter. Yes. So, if you like the medicines made by Estira, are you writing a letter of recommendation, Grandpa? At Florentia's words, Lulak laughed and nodded the head. Yes, let's do it. I'll tell Brockle in advance. Wow, Grandpa is the best. Florentia was very happy and ran away and hugging Lulak. Lulak melted in the funny act he had never received from other children who were always afraid of him. Yes, he didn't know Lulak, who was patting the child's small back and shed a bleak laugh. The fact that the granddaughter, who seems to be hugging with her face buried in his grandfather's lap, is actually rolling her head fiercely with her eyes shining. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The West Building is where the offices and conference rooms of people working for Lombardi are gathered. A person who was not often seen here was walking around the first floor of the West Building. That person isn't he Galyahan? But why is he so restless here? Each of the people who reported to their superiors looked back at Galyahan and was confused. Who? The corridor where Galyahan sighed was in front of Clarivan's office. The door with the name Clarivan Pellets in gold foil looked so big. It's a good idea to listen to your daughter. He came here because he wanted to, but Galyahan hesitated. It was because Clarivan was scared. Shall I just go back? It was true that during the Korai cotton business, Clarivan's help was very much appreciated. However, it was a separate question whether it was scary or not, and Clarivan's sharp eyes Gallihan's shoulders drooped down. He was very pathetic. Even before Florentia told him, he had thought about getting Clarivan's help. But after all, he just closed his mind because it was awkward to talk to Clarivan. But my daughter was right. Of course, if there is anything you don't know, you should ask. In particular, it was correct to receive all the help that could be received by someone who was still not good at the business like himself. Taking a small deep breath, Galyahan, who hardened his mind, knocked on the door of the office. Knock. It was whispering once, but it was quite loud. However, no answer came from inside. Once again, knock. Galyahan knocked again, but there was still no answer inside. Oh, I guess it's not inside. Galyahan's face brightened strangely. Isn't it unavoidable because there are no people inside? It was when Galyahan turned to this light step, pledging to come back later, maybe not to keep it. Oh, not too far away, Clarivan stood, looking at Galyahan with arms folded and leaning obliquely in the window. Look, Clarivan, I was wondering when you will knock, Clarivan said in a cold voice. He was watching it all. Galyahan's face turned slightly red with embarrassment, but it didn't take longer than I thought. Instead of answering, Galyahan smiled and scratched his head. You must have come because you have something to say. Clarivan walked up and said. As he looked at it, Galyahan thought, Florentia clearly said, Mr. Clarivan is always kind. Suddenly, he was worried about treating his daughter so coldly. Come in. First, Clarivan, who took the lead, said as he opened the door of his office. Well, excuse me for a moment. Galyahan walked in, saying hello politely. It was a stiff movement that seemed to make a creaking sound because of tension. At that appearance, Clarivan laughed without anyone knowing. End of chapter 29. Chapter 30. Galyahan and Clarivan sat face to face. What surprise was that Clarivan gave Galyahan a senior seat. It was awkward, but anyway, as Clarivan pointed, Galyahan sat in a soft chair and spoke with a dry mouth. I know you'll be busy, but the reason I've been looking for this is to get advice. You don't have to come to me like this, and you should have called me to the top of Durak. It's not about the Koroi cotton business. I'm here for advice on my personal business. Galyahan Lombardi's personal business. Galyahan felt quite interesting. The words of business with Galyahan, who always lived in the library of the mansion, or the pleasure of reading books in his own library, did not much. In a way, the last Koroi cotton project was forcibly entrusted to Galyahan. But now, you're trying to start a personal business. Clarivan thought he might have to re-evaluate Galyahan. I don't know how much help I can be, but let's say it's comfortably. Clarivan said in an uncomfortable voice. To be honest, if it were someone else, he wouldn't have driven it out, saying that there wasn't much free time. But strangely, it was Clarivan who showed a weaker appearance to Florentia. As if he didn't know that Galyahan would answer, Clarivan would listen to the story so easily, his eyes were wide open. Seeing him hesitating for a moment in embarrassment, Clarivan said calmly, I'm not saying that I'm going to hear the story because time is running out, Galyahan. Ah, Sin, I'm sorry. So my plan is, Galyahan, who had his throat trimmed, began to explain with a thoughtful voice. It was a little more sequential introduction than the explanation that he had always had with Florentia in the morning. But it's still verbose, and Galyahan had to talk about it for quite some time. When that long explanation was over, Galyahan had a sore throat. However, without even realizing his condition, he was nervous and busy watching Clarivan's reaction. Clarivan said nothing. Then Galyahan was terrified. Was it such a bad plan? Enough to lose something to say. As time passed, and in the end, when Galyahan squeezed his shoulders in disappointment, Clarivan suddenly opened his mouth. It's amazing. Yes, of course, there are complementary points. All of course, it is. What are the points? Galyahan asked hastily, but Clarivan didn't give the right answer right away. There is one condition. What is? Please let me be with you in Galyahan's business. Galyahan blew his eyes. He wondered what he heard right now. I'll say it again, but Galyahan's business plan is big. Then, are you saying it's good? Yes, honestly, it's amazing. Clarivan admitted that he was underestimating a man named Galyahan Lombardi. But with my advice, the project is a huge success and I would be very hungry if I couldn't participate. So if you accept my condition, I'll tell you the perfect point. Galyahan smiled and suddenly became a serious expression. Became a serious expression. Okay. But Clarivan, didn't you have an employment contract with Lombardi? This is my personal business, not Lombardi. Galyahan wanted an independent asset that wasn't tied to the name Lombardi. He wanted the power to protect Florentia from the storm that one day would settle for the next lord's house. No matter how desperately Clarivan's help was, he couldn't rely on Lombardi's power again. Suddenly, however, a smile spread to Clarivan's face. It was a very satisfying smile. Such prudence, even better. Then he said, as if not to worry, the contract between me and Lombardi is a fixed-term employment contract, not a life contract. Also, don't worry, we have a clause stating that you can work as much as possible. It was a new contract made by moving to the position of the education center at the request of the Lord. In that case, it is something I would rather ask for. Let's do it together, Clarivan. Galyahan was displeased and reached out one hand. Galyahan, who looked down at it for a moment, also reached out. After a brief handshake, Clarivan said in one more relaxed voice, once the details of profit distribution will be adjusted later, I will start with the supplementary measures. Galyahan nodded fervently at Clarivan's words. It looked like he was watching Florentia in class, and Clarivan laughed deeply. The mayor of this business should be the commoners, not the nobles. The commoners? It was the opposite direction from the plan that Galyahan had made. Yes, so naturally, the location of the store should be Helslot Market, not Sedacuna. Located on the other side of the Sedacuna shopping street, the Helslot Market was a huge commercial district located in the center of the Emperor's direct command. Unlike Sedacuna, which is relatively quiet, it was always noisy and boasting a huge floating population with people gathered from all over the empire. And the meeting between the two continued for a while after that. If it hadn't been time for Clarivan to go to the meeting, it might have been going on until sunset. Clarivan asked as he stood up with a slightly exhausted face from the enthusiastic discussion, looking at Galyahan. Are this the Lord? What are you talking about? The one who asked you to go get some advice. Galyahan was already more than half convinced. It was said that Lulak had moved his back toward him to empower his youngest son, but Galyahan smiled and shook his head. No, it was Florentia. Yes? Actually, I haven't spoken to my father yet. I was afraid that he would be confused because I was delusional and this is a very personal business, so I was thinking alone. But Florentia said I could ask Mr. Clarivan. Galyahan was cool, but he was sincerely grateful for Clarivan. It's proof that Clarivan teaches very well our Florentia. Thank you. He received a thank you from her parents, but Clarivan couldn't laugh. It could have been simply that a child told the story of a teacher who seemed to know everything. Galyahan seemed to be thinking that way. However, for some reason, Clarivan kept thinking of Florentia's deep eyes, and I kept hearing strong premonitions as if it wasn't a product of such a coincidence that Galyahan came to him. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I visited Dr. O'Malley's lab early in the morning as soon as my father went to work. Fortunately, it was early so there was only Estira in the lab. She must have been in a bad mood after missing the recommendation letter in front of me and Jason's grumbling. As if nothing had happened today, she is constantly doing her job. I really wanted to help Estira. As I quietly opened the door and entered, Estira, who was diligently cleaning the desk in the lab, saw me and greeted me. You are here, lady. Good morning, Estira. You look better today. I thought of a good way. Is it a good way? Estira opened her eyes round. It's a good idea to get a letter of recommendation to Estira. Miss Florentia. Estira looked at me as if she was moved. Estira, you know the book you showed me before? My grandmother's recipe notebook? Yes, that. Can you show me again? As I went in and out for wrist treatment, I asked Estira a lot of questions. The first was to get acquainted, and the second was to find out as much as possible about her. One of the things I learned about that was about Estira's grandmother. Although it was in a small rural village, it seemed that he helped people with a remedy that was passed down from generation to generation using a variety of medicinal herbs available in the vicinity where there were no clinics. And because of the influence, Estira said that she had been exposed to medicinal herbs from the beginning and she thought she wanted to help people who are sick. Of course, please wait. Estira brought a notebook from her desk in the corner of the lab. It was an old notebook with stains on the cover. I took it and flipped the page halfway through. Can you explain a little bit more about this drug? Estira looked at the part I was pointing to and said, it's the medicine that my grandmother made and told me to bring it to people who sprained their ankles or hurt their shoulders while working in the village. Estira laughing as if she missed her grandmother, she read her grandmother's handwriting. It is a medicine that has been passed down from mouth to mouth in our family for a long time, so it is not written in official books. It's a medicine that relieves swelling and reduces pain to some extent. How did you use this? Isn't it medicine to eat? No, I use this medicine by moistening it with a cloth and placing it on the sore spot. I read it as if passing by, but my memory was correct. I added a few important questions that weren't written down. Can this medicine be used for a long time? Yes, when I worked, there is always a place where everyone gets sick. Some people use it every night for several months. What is the smell? Doesn't it smell bad? No, it's a rather sweet smell. The main ingredient is dried tree nuts. It is perfect, but I tried to hide my excitement and said calmly, let's change this a little bit. But can we make it a thick like the last Malcolm medicine? Estira nodded right away at my words. She didn't even ask where I was going to use it. Yes, young lady. Their eyes were full of trust for me. I smiled at Estira. If this goes as planned, I can safely send Estira to the Imperial Academy. Ah, and are there any herbs that feel cool when you eat or apply them to your body? If it's cool, there's a tea leaf called hipshi. Ah, hipshi. I've had it before. Drinking like mint leaves made my mouth feel upset. Prepare it as a separate concentrate. Why is hipshi? Original food also smells better to make it taste better. Medicine will also do. It's important to make it feel like something works. Ah, as expected. Estira now even looked at me with respect. I shrugged as if this wasn't a big deal. I'll ask you to get the beeswax and oil and send it here. I'm going to mix two concentrates here. There. A medicine that relieves swelling and has a slightly soothing effect. Tea leaves that feel cool like mint and beeswax. I laughed when I remembered the medicine that would be born by combining them. Ointment with a picture of a tiger. It is trying to reproduce what was once called a national ointment and used as a panacea for arthritis, headache, and stuffy nose. And I will send Estira to the academy with it, with two shining letters of recommendation. There is no way that elderly people like Grandpa and Brockle can resist the temptation of this ointment. If this drug is successfully completed, there is only one thing left to worry about: the question of whether Grandpa's sore knee was on the left or the right. End of chapter 30.